I off 80 cents again. Walk going nuts here on walk. Walk going crazy. Walk almost $3 though. 296. Pretty crazy. That was nuts. Same way it moves this morning. That's how it moves around, I guess. Up from 19 cents today. 19 cents to 2.
Hey everyone. All right, I already did a pretty in-depth stream earlier on Discord, which unfortunately wasn't recorded, but we went over this exact scenario of us basically sustaining these ranges here, why these areas are calculated, how 5-4, 5-5, 5-6 is extremely calculated for today's session. These are 346, 343 point expansions to 375, 380, 378. They're also 430, 436, 432, 461, 62 point ranges. Uh, in theory, you could have just recycled the same spots on SPX, and I did mention that basically they could stall 74, 28, 26, 29, 31 on SPX, which would be equivalent of them stalling 7450s on ES and potentially return it back to 7428 on ES. This is where we had room to 28 and 31 from earlier, and that's what I drew. Whereas on SPX, it's kind of like going back to 7403, 740350, which is that weekly opening range. And I already went over why these areas are calculated, so I'm not going to go over them again. But go back and study that. Unfortunately, the bot wasn't turned on, so it didn't record notes for that transcription. But basically, I had them written down for you guys, and I went over the exact ranges and why they were calculated. So you should have had them written down because I did send those to you guys earlier when we went over this, and kind of like this you can kind of see. Okay, so this area was a 346 point range, and at the 90 to 93, hence holding there. 7403 was the 346, 357. Okay, off the opening range, so that makes sense. That's an open ratio, low ratio. 7421 were the expansion ratios. That makes total sense at 2-1 and 2-8. Hence, they kind of stalled there on Friday and closed at that spot on Friday. Then we had our 74, 35, and 34, 74, 37, 38. These were like the extensions. And that's where they held 346 points here. And essentially, that's what could push them to these 375, 378, 380, making these max ratios for the session today, maybe for overnight. So lots of confluence in these spots here, okay? And I figured they could probably test here first and then bring this back down. That was kind of the theme. And specifically, if they did something like this, where was it? Can you guys see this here? Especially when they came back and held off 3-4, 3-5, okay? I figured they'll probably test 5-4, 5-5 first, which is needed to kind of reduce risk of losing 2-8. And then they could probably bring it back to 2-8, 3-1, 3-2, and then do basically exactly what we're doing now. My timing aspects were just around this point here, so let's go back and see. Yes, like right around here. If they, this is basically the point where I figured their one end has to likely break because these are extended until very, very, very late in the session. Okay, like mainly after the bell and into session close. They could also just keep this stuck at this point, but I had some pretty high odds of breaking basically either that 3-7-3-8 or that 2-8 range here around 343 to 345. So far this looks like they're trying to break down that 2-8 spot, and 2-8's exactly where they held here. And that's what could recycle range back basically to this area here, to the 2-1, 2-4, and almost kind of like reset Friday's close, if that makes sense. Like this is the worst case scenario. Obviously, best case is them holding the line here and then trying to push back and retrace and keep this channel bound overnight between the 30s and 40s. I feel like that would be the safest bet, is keeping it in here as opposed to returning it back to the zone, because returning it back to the zone could put 74.10 back in play, it could put 74.03 back in play, 73.88, 73.95, whereas keeping it channel bound in this area here kind of can offset some of the risk. So let's see, what do you guys think? Odds were right around this 4-3 to 4-5 period. I could be off by a minute or two. These were calculated times, so I manually measured them, but that was kind of the idea into the close here. These time metrics were really accurate too at 322, 304, 305, and these are linked to these highs, which are basically linked to session close. These were the 50% intervals here. When measuring off 423 and these points here, it basically makes it so that there isn't too many odds in real time, okay? Because this would basically run after the close here. Like there's not very many odds. So like basically one end would have to break. That's the upside break. This would be the downside break. On Intel, which area did it break? Yeah, so next time Smos, say it broke off that 126.56. Like, you guys should have to, you should start writing down the calculated ranges for a lot of these names. Then that way, at least we know where they could trigger back to. So like a break like that off one, where's our Intel's? Like, I'll just post it in here. I think Josh was writing them down in there. So 126 break is what can re-trigger 130, 135, 130, 150, 130, 196. Okay, so you guys have to get better at figuring out like triggers like this. Like this is a huge trigger. These are annual calculated ranges. So a move like this and off here, okay, then that means it could maybe clear back to 131.50 into the close or something. $74.28 being retested here at exactly 345. This is essentially the point in time where I figured that they would have to either break range or essentially break either side or see if they're going to try to sustain. It's kind of like the end trigger point for the session today. What do you guys think? You think that they hold the line here? 345, super calculated point here. I could be off by a minute because I manually measure this, but I figured this is kind of the point where either one end is going to break. If they keep it, if they hold it but like don't break either end, like basically hold to it but don't retrace or have follow through, this is where it could become pinnable into close. Does that make sense? Like basically between 2-4, 2-8, 3-1, 3-4, 3-7, 3-8, and that kind of just would keep it stuck a little bit. My only concern was they never closed over the 3-7-2-5 here, even though they did test 3-8. Notice that they didn't close above. That was the only concern I had. So, and not concern for like downside, but concern for what kind of action would that hint to me? That they held 2-8 but they stalled 3-8, and then they tested above but didn't close above. What kind of action could that entail potentially? And that seemed like it would probably be the case into end of day, and especially since we already hit max range. Market doesn't owe us anything above 5.455. We already determined that those were max ranges earlier in the session today. Exactly, that could just make it become pinnable. Okay, when things become pinnable, they normally don't really owe us much more. They can just keep it within these ranges here. So I would say pinning it above 3.4, 3.5 would be best case scenario. If they can get it back to 3.7, 3.8, I would really prefer that into close. Keeping it around 2.8, 3.1 isn't bad. It's just that would kind of keep it in the zone, and that could put some overnight pressure over there. Okay, so I would rather get back into the channel, which is above the 3.4, 3.5. That's just me personally. I did take some calls for tomorrow off that 2.8 spot, like I mentioned earlier. The reason I didn't do today's date after like covering most of my calls up here is I just figured that it's probably better to give myself some time in case they make it pinnable into close. And that's because I factored in overnight lows, I factored in today's open, I factored in afternoon action, I factored in 5455 already triggering. Okay, a lot of this whole move is very calculated, and we already talked about this. But what do you guys think? Max range for real-time session. So 345 had to be the turnaround point. Okay, you could probably calculate like a midpoint here, but I think it's like right at close at 359. Highs are in. I think highs are in, but anyway, 74. So put this for like for end of real-time session. 74.38 to 74.41, 74.44 to 74.46, 74.48 to 74.51. I feel like that's a pretty healthy range. Okay, can you guys vote on that, please? So when I went back and manually measured this, I feel like the point was like right around in here. So it is after the bell, okay? But I figured that maybe if we measured off like the actual session, which I know isn't really that accurate, then there could be some end of day odds, like off like a 7-minute interval, 7.5, which is basically right into the last 10 minutes of the close. And there was an odd right at 3:59, which is obviously very late, but all right, let's get some votes. So if you guys are voting highs are in, that means that like this high is in. I'm not talking about this high of day. I'm talking about like for end of session, okay? Just as an FYI, I'm not talking about the 5455. I'm talking about the last half of the session. So from here. Okay? So if you guys voted highs are in, you're voting that 3738 technically, or 3639, whatever would be the high. If you voted the secondary, it means that you think they'll take out 38 and break to 41. So sorry, I should have been a little bit more clear on that. Poet had some end of day odds too. I don't know who's trading this. These were my mid calculated flips on this one for not high of day retest, but like retesting the sticks from highs, which just retesting highs doesn't necessarily mean that you have to retest the actual high of day. It just means like engaging back with those prior high sticks. Do you guys see that? And they did. Okay, from like those open close ratios, but they haven't really gotten a full break. This one had odds for after the close today, so I figured maybe it comes back end of session. There were some odds on this like right at 354, 56, 58, and then after the bell for whoever's trading this. Poet getting a really nice break, you guys, right ahead of these calculated flips that I marked. Yeah, gold was moving really nicely too this afternoon, like we had looked at. Bernie was talking about this earlier too. Oil stalled right at our 99.84 mark and now just kind of consolidating. I feel like this is worth noting here on crude. And then let's see, yes. 350 getting a break back over that 3235. So let's see, these are some calculated times here around 352. Okay. But that's what you said, Phantom, like the other week, thinking it'd go to 30, like 900s. So that's not how it works. These are very, very, very calculated ranges. If they pin the market at these spots here, they could take this to the 70s. Okay, so I wouldn't get too bearish too fast, not yet. If they close us near 274.28, 25, that's still not technically bearish. That's still within range. Closes at this point that would lean more to the bear end would be on a 5-4 test, would be beneath 74.21.22. Technically anything above 21.22 right now is bullish. Beneath 2.8 is like bull neutral. It still could lead back to retesting these areas here. Anything above 2831 I think would be best case scenario. Over 3738 is super calculated, so this is a huge spot. But this is a very, very, very calculated area off 74.54, 55. So, and the fact that we triggered it today, remember the 12th is a multi-flip date tomorrow, so today's closing price matters for several structures. There's over, I think, 7 or 8 structures that close today, okay? That could carry through till month end. So it's just something worth noting. So let's see. This was a mid-calculated flip from these. There was an odd for 4:23 p.m. So I don't know if there's something happening after the bell today. Oh, but it's worth noting for whoever's trading after hours or watching after hours. All right, let's see. This is the odd that I had for a retest here. I always watch 354, 55, but I'm just watching this calculated point at 53 since this was a calculated odd. So let's see for a 3738 retest. I feel like if they can get it back over 3738, there's some decent odds to retest, at least 41, 42. I voted for 4446, but obviously I could be wrong. And that's mainly if they don't clear 3738. I would say within like this window here, because that's a pretty important window to not clear by. 7436 retested here off 353. We'll see if they can try holding the line here and getting a pushback over 37 and 38. The 345 hold was extremely calculated, just an FYI, especially off 74, 27, 75. And that's a really calculated area too. I don't have it marked on this chart, but on another chart we marked that as I think the 346 range or something, and it was exactly 2775. So it's worth just noting. This was linked to April 15th, I think. What do you guys think? 20 seconds left here. $74.37 retesting, but no breaks over that 3725 just yet. We'll see if they can break this off the first 5-second interval here at 355. This is generally a point to turn things around for the market anyway, but these would be some very, very calculated types of ranges. Need to see where the 30-second intervals kind of close. That's usually how you can gauge the direction of the stick. Okay. There it is. 7438 being retested here. We'll see if they can close over that 3725. A good structural close right here, or even off 3825 or 38 would give odds of coming back and retesting that. There is some overhead around 4-1, but it's mainly around this area here. And you probably should mark 4-6. I deleted a bunch off that previous chart. But this is a very, very, very pinnable spot to close. So even if they wanted to leave it here, that wouldn't be the worst case scenario. But them meeting 3738 ahead of 359 could give that end of day push. I guess we'll have to see. I voted for the 4-4 area into close, but again, I could be wrong. A lot of it's going to depend on what they do off 3738 and specifically the times that they do it at too. So how did you guys do today in terms of your trades? Oh, 420. I was like, oh, 1420. I'm still swinging CSCO, and that looks like it's going to trigger that 99.28 soon. This one is the one I figured could eventually get to 110. Just FYI, whoever's not trading this, this is a very, very, very clean swing trade so far. Where's my thread on this? CSCO, CSCO. I don't think there is someone. I don't think anyone made one for this. It was going vertical today, but here we go. Let me create thread. CSCO. Well, Friday, but we looked at it Friday off 90, I don't know, 4 or 91 or something like that. Back in here, 94, I think. It made a really good trade off these areas today too. What was that? Oh, there it is. There's the end of day break. So ES does have odds, you guys, for after the close. And look at that, 74.38, 75 close. That's a good close. That's exactly where I would want this thing to close. Okay? Kind of like what we were saying. 74.38 plus is a good close. That's a really good close. 7438 plus close. That's really good. That could get us back, nest in the channel overnight, and then potentially get us back to those 5455 retest. I'm just gonna stick around for a few minutes because I want to see if they break here off these flips, because I had some odds of retesting, but they were a little bit after the bell. They were around 402.04. So whoever voted for breaks of 3.9, good job. I figured that if they don't clear 3.8 specifically at this point in time, even though they tested it, then they probably won't get that full break. But you see this 4.75, that's what could have pushed this to like that 4.3, 4.4 area into the close here, as you guys can see. So I think I might still have some contracts open. I should probably double check that. Oops. Okay, so that seemed pretty pinnable to me based on what they did there. CSCO, I would keep that on watch. That's a really good close on that one too. Tesla, I didn't really get a chance to talk about this one too much, but I have to go. So I have an appointment in like 20 minutes. So I will catch you guys later this evening, okay? Study the session today. If you got chopped up for whatever reason, go back and review. These were all very calculated ranges in my opinion. So do your best to try being more diligent and ahead of this, so then that way you can basically trigger all the ranges from like highs to lows, open to close, and then that way you have a better understanding of the overall market structure and dynamics. Poet re-triggered that 1420. You can kind of see that reduction on that stick here. So this little range reduction stick makes total sense. I would watch for the later periods tonight if anyone's day trading this. I did leave some calls on this one for end of week.